Oh my goodness, what a crowd. Hey, so this afternoon, we're going to talk for a short amount of time about transforming the unified network at Echelon, and that on Echelon piece is very, very, very important. I'm going to turn it over to Major General Promotable Ray, who will be backfilling me in the January timeframe. He'll lead us off on the discussion. Then I'm going to turn it over to Major General Denise McPhail from NetCom, who will talk about how she is enabling the unified network, again, at Echelon. And then I'm going to turn it over to Major General Pat Ellis, who is the cross-functional team lead for all things that we're doing with in command and control at Echelon. And then we'll wrap it up with a few comments from Mr. Mark Kitts. It's great to see you all. I'm going to pass it over to General Ray.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. Can everybody hear me? How's everybody doing? It's a big crowd. I'm kind of excited. So I got a couple things I wanted to talk about today. And you heard the team. The team is going to lay it all out for you. So you heard the theme of AUSA, transforming for a complex world. Well, what we're doing is what you just heard General Morrison say, and we're going to try to scale on top of that. To meet this, your Army G6 is conducting unified network transforming at Echelon. What that means is at the strategic, the operational, and the tactical level. We want things to be more simple. We want it to be more simpler for the user. We want it to be more intuitive for the user. And we also want to make sure it's more flexible for the user. So what's the big idea? So here's the big idea. Enable a global force who can plug into the network and fight upon arrival on the battlefield. That's exactly what we're trying to do. One way to do this, and most of you have heard it a couple times now, and you're probably wondering what the details are behind it, and we're going to try to shape that for you today, is our strategy is through what we call C2 fix. A lighter, number one, a lighter, more agile and technical team in low spectrum and very, very simple for the user. We're doing SATCOM as a managed service at a scalable, predictable, and fast way to get after this. We're looking at commercial COTS equipment for automation, and we're also looking for it at speed. Lastly, it's the lessons learned on what we're doing with the units that are receiving those C2 fixed capabilities on the battlefield. And we're learning from that, and we're iterating on that and making changes in this tick, transforming in contact is what we're trying to do. Finally, we're operationalizing our Army Unified Network 2.0. And how are we doing that? Through data-centric operations. We will be able to enable for the network to deliver effects in support of our warfighter and the mission. So I want to leave you some key points to think about. The network is for the data, while the data is for the warfighter. So think about what I just said. The network is for the data, and the data is for the warfighter. So here are 5 things I want you to think about when you're thinking about the data part of data centricity. We're going to look hard at data integration across all domains. We're going to look at more AI and machine learning that we're going to put against that data in order to enrich it for the user and for the warfighter. We're going to strengthen data in our governance and our security across our cross domains as well. We're going to leverage cloud at the edge in computing because we want to bridge our tactical and strategic as we look at the unified network. And finally, we're going to enhance the soldier-centric data access. So those are the 5 things I want you to think about when you think about where we're going when it comes to data as we continue to look at enhancing what we're already putting in place. And I'll pass it over to Denise, who's going to take it to the next level.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Yes. All right. Okay, so it's a very interesting time to be in Netcom, especially coming from HQDA G6 and now being at Netcom. And Netcom's role and primary mission is delivering the unified network based on zero trust principles. So what does that really mean? So I think first it's important that we talk about 25. 25 is the big pivot. So that is when Netcom is going to go from just being a network provider to now a service provider and cybersecurity. So we're now, hello, okay. It goes in and out. Yeah, okay. So now we're going to really start focusing on not only delivering that network, but everything that's going through that network. And then making sure everything that goes through that network is protected. And how are we going to do this? Well, first of all, we are globally focused, yet theater aligned. And what does that mean? That means we're going to have those global collaboration tools that are going to be available to us both horizontally and vertically. Horizontally, letting our theaters talk to one another, vertically going up and down through the Army, but also as we start looking at what are those capabilities, it's going to be things like software as a service that we leverage, as well as ICAM, getting our identity straight. Also, if I was to look at an outcome, we're going to have seamless movement across the globe. And what does that mean? If anybody was in the session this morning, it was described pretty well by our leadership, Joe Morrison and Joe Barrett, but it really means being able to pick up with your system and not have an image, right? And that is a huge thing. Any of us that have gone through all these different deployments in our career, having to re-image over and over and over. Now you're not going to have to do that. You're going to have seamless movement across the globe. And then network visibility. So network visibility is about being able to see down through Echelon, right? So from the enterprise down to that tactical edge. And then if I was to tie that back into what General Ray just talked about with C2 Fix, we're going to leverage the C2 Fix and all the lessons we learn, starting from here in CONUS, going to the Pacific and Europe, and ensure that we're able to integrate that into the larger architecture, make sure we have the capacity, and make sure we have the visibility down to the tactical edge on both the performance of the network as well as the security of it. And then a couple other things coming in the future, software-defined networking. That is going to be significant not only for C2 Fix, but even going into C2 Next. That's going to give us the agility we need to be able to rapidly change and manipulate our network and actually be able to maneuver our network to best support the warfighter. So I think I'll end on the warfighter now, and I'm going to hand it over to you, Pat, to take it over to what we're providing to the network warfighter. Sorry.
Sounds great. Whoa. So good afternoon. Yeah, one of these is not like the other. So I am the operational force up here. A lot of responsibility lands on my shoulder with that. General Morrison was a little funny when he introduced me. He just said the CFT that's working all this stuff. That's because he wanted to let me be the first one to say it publicly that we have been renamed from the network cross-functional team into the command and control cross-functional team. I think that really reemphasizes the importance that we're putting on command and control, and then it really reinforces what General Way worked on for all those years as my predecessor, is that we're so much more than just a network, and that the network leads to data, data leads to better decisions. So part of the reason we've been redesignated is to reflect where we've been. The other part of it is to reflect where we're going. As General Rainey reminds me pretty frequently, is that my job is to put the commander back in command and control, and to enable the commander to make better, faster, and more optimized decisions at a high rate of speed. And that's something I take very seriously, and that has been my charter from General Rainey from the very beginning. And the way we're doing that with the current effort is there's kind of two sides to the effort. There's a C2 fix effort that General Ray just talked about, where we've been in charge of really just, as from on the AFC side, in conjunction with our ASOL partners, is how do we get new technologies into the hands of our warfighters tonight? If they had to go to fight tonight, what technology can we get in their hands to allow them to make more, faster, and better decisions? Taking that very seriously, we've been part of 2 large C2 fix efforts at the brigade and a little bit at the division level with the unit in the 101st, and also now out in Hawaii with the 25th Infantry Division, and their exercise is ongoing today. Working that for C2 Fix, and then there's a down trace for who else is going to go into the C2 Fix organizations, or who's going to get those tools. A lot of that looks like technology that you're probably familiar with, proliferated low Earth orbit capability, some additional TAC capability in their hands, some additional radio capability. And then something we've been talking about a lot is enabling the command post by making it a little bit more modular, as opposed to having a big monolithic command post that everyone looks the same. Is putting tools in the hands of the commanders that allows them to kind of scale up and scale down, reconfigure their command posts as they need to based on the mission, or really also based on how the commander chooses to command. That's something we were able to kind of observe watching the conflict in Europe, is the command posts were constantly changing as a result of the battlefield. So instead of building something from the beginning that's one big thing and that our soldiers are just going to take wrenches to and take apart anyway, this allows us to build something that's a little bit more modular. We're working with Mr. Kitts on doing that. The next effort that we're getting heavily involved with is the next generation command and control, Next Gen C2 for short. And that really falls in a lot what General Ray was talking about, is transport undermines all that. You've got to be able to move your ones and zeros or it doesn't matter. Really, you've got to ingest your data in an intelligent way to decrease the cognitive load on your soldiers so they don't have to screen every bit of data that comes in there, and then get that data organized into a common data layer where that data exists for anyone to use. And you just build applications in the application layer where our warfighting functions, our commanders, our whoever it is that's in the battlefield with us can use those applications to reach into that data layer and grab that same layer or same data. So instead of having stovepipe data feeds, we're now going to an organized data layer that everyone can reach into and pull out, use for their purpose, and then put it back in that data layer. Next Gen C2 is really going to capture that for us, and the next big iteration of that, folks are very familiar with PCC4, PCC5 will happen in March. That's the next big iteration of that, where we're going to turn that into a proof of principle. So take it out of an experiment and make it into a proof of principle. Look forward to your questions.
No, you should clap. He closed it pretty good, I thought. Yeah. So first off, I want to thank you all for taking time out of your day here for joining us. I started to want to acknowledge sort of what you're seeing here from the Army, right? I think this is my 4th or 5th year doing a Warrior Corner, and what you're really seeing from the Army now is a cultural shift around a unified network. You know, when I got to C3T at the time, I was like, what does that mean, right? And you're seeing requirements and acquisition integration across our entire unified network. So now PEO C3N network owns the entire unified network. You're seeing collaboration between the C2 CFT, NetCom, and the G6 community. So we are now truly treating this network as a unified network. And I would say that behavior in industry has to match sort of this cultural behavior on the government side. And so I'm really interested. I've already heard from a lot of you, but I'm really interested in, I think is critical for both industry and government to really, no kidding, get momentum behind this cultural shift. And I think this panel is an indicator, a continued indicator of our commitment to that unified network. We are not going to talk in terms of enterprise and tactical separate networks any longer. And so you're going to see a unified front from us as a government, certainly on the acquisition and requirement side. General Morrison, I appreciate your leadership in that, and I think this is a great indicator of our future. A couple of things I wanted to talk about. I'm going to use General Ray's comments, I think, as a framework here. You know, the network provides the data for our soldiers to use the data. And that network that provides that data offers lots of opportunity, I think, in programs, right? I'm a program guy. I'm an acquisition officer. And so those opportunities for industry, those opportunities for our warfighters to leverage turn into programs. And so when we look at the network providing that data, that C2 fix infrastructure that all of these professionals are talking about, there are lots of opportunities for industry to help us shape C2 fix. The next generation tactical terminal, looking at how we integrate our transport architecture, the future of our tactical waveforms and tactical radio infrastructure. These are two really important areas. And General Ellis mentioned this too, and I think this shapes a lot of what we're doing in the future is how do we configure our command posts? Both the 101st and now the 25th, our two units that are enabling C2 fix, are really doing it in a way that's way more mobile and diverse and dispersed than ever before. And that is ripe for technology innovation. That's ripe for Army innovation. How we employ our network is so much of how we employ our command posts. And that's going to underpin a lot of what we do in the future. And that is a program that you're going to see in the future is how do we get after a modular command post. So General Ellis's team is working on a future requirement that we're going to see here very soon. And you're going to see a lot of experimentation from my team, not just on the network, on how we deliver power, on how we deliver our applications, how we deliver our compute, how we build the network that delivers that data. That data gets delivered a lot of times in a command post. And then lastly, I would say, the warfighters that are using the data, there are lots of programs and opportunities in our future for warfighter engagement with the data around a unified network. And General McPhail mentioned two of them. First is we've got to be able to access that network. Whether we're in any network in the Army, we have got to build a cyber secure, zero trust principle access management program. And so we have the ICAM program across the entire Army, and there will be lots of future opportunities for how industry can help shape how we enter into the network as an identity, as a person, as any sort of entity entering into our network. Another opportunity is our Unified Network Operations program. The initial foray into that program is currently in source selection. However, what you're already seeing from the Army is we're not just satisfied by this initial foray. And so we're already talking to you, industry, about the future of that program in an IDIQ contract 2 years from now so that we can onboard and diversify our infrastructure with industry on the Unified Network Operations. Because whether we're doing it at very tactical echelons or we're doing it all the way up to your seat at a desk in an Army facility, we have got to be able to defend, monitor, and operate our network. And we need to do it as a unified, integrated solution. And so I am excited about our opportunity to engage with industry on UNO and ICAM for our unified network. And then General Ellis talked about Next Gen C2. We recently did an industry day. I am really interested or intrigued by your input. We very recently closed an RFI. I will be personally reading responses to that RFI. So I'm really excited about a future engagement with industry on Next Gen C2. Really looking forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
So before we open it up for questions, I do want to double tap a couple things that hopefully have come across. So there's that old adage that lasting change is institutional change. And so new governance that General Ray was talking about, where requirements and resources are being completely aligned at the HQDA level, aimed on one unified network. And if you're not a part of where the Army's network is heading, well, resources control behavior. One network provider, our cyber and Netcom, and getting rid of all the disparate networks that we've had in the inventory for years. One command responsible for making sure that that happens. PEO-C3N, one PEO responsible for delivering the totality of the Army's network, regardless of the echelon that it's at, strategic, operational, and tactical. And what this alignment is allowing us to do is move at a speed that is unprecedented across the totality of the Army, not in separate silos, whether it's at the brigade combat team or at the installation level, the totality of the network. In crushing these artificial divides that we had put into place, there is no data centricity unless we crush those divides. And so hopefully that is what you are seeing up here, because institutional change leads to lasting change. And so with that, we look forward to your questions.
Man, we crushed it. Yeah. You know what I always tell you guys? Don't tell me that we crushed it. All right.
I'll take the first go. Matt James, Barbaricum, former crypto guy. A lot of lessons learned in this venue from my experience with DARPA and other agencies of that nature. Probably not discussions meant for this crowd, but how do we get you some of those lessons learned and have some of those discussions with you guys in the future, much of which is already owned by the DoD, just getting it to the right people.
What specifically? Oh. You can speak to anyone on this panel. We're open to any conversation you have when it comes to that. We want to learn more. Just like I stated on the last part, the lessons learned is key. So.
Yeah, and I think industry engagement is very much my job, right? And so, it is very important to me that both myself and PMs are available to industry. Many of you know I dedicate one Tuesday a month, a whole day to industry, whether that's new business or current business. But you asked a great question, which I think I'm gonna turn into a question a little bit, right? Like as the Army sort of goes down C2 fix, next gen C2, as we are on this journey to modernize our network, how are we making sure industry at large sees some of these lessons learned that we're seeing as we experiment, as we do transformation and contact, right? This assumption we're always going to be successful would be stupid, right? And so I think we absolutely have to improve. So one of the things that we set out with the Next Gen C2 Industry Day was, okay, how do we be transparent? Like how do we iteratively sort of show what we're learning in our C2 fix and Next Gen C2 architectures? And so hold us accountable to that transparency. And if you're not seeing it, I ask that you come talk directly to me, and we can make sure that we're getting more transparent with industry. And you also should have seen that in the Next Gen C2 RFI. I think we specifically asked that question: how can we be more transparent? What are some examples? And so thank you for the question. Sorry I turned it into my own talking point there.
Hello, Shank Yandinya with HashiCorp. I have a 15-part question. First question, within the context of the AGUN efforts along with the unified network, what workloads are going to be specifically sort of the responsibility of NetCom and like the deployed units, and what work is coming off of those deployed units so that they're less burdened in terms of the network activities that they're engaged in today? And then I think the other question I have is how do you perceive application owners and the ATOs to operate within your model that you're laying out?
Yeah, Denise, I'll go first and then give it to you. That'd be okay. Shank, good to see you. Thanks for being here. It's good to see you, brother. So on the first question, I think one area, especially on AGUN, as we modernize our holistic network, we've got to improve. We've got to continually iterate on our ability to transition that network administration and operation to NetCom. And we're doing it as a holistic network. So it's no longer this tactical and enterprise, sort of logical divide that never existed. And so I think Denise and I are being very deliberate about how do we deliver a capability, AGUN and a software-defined capability, and then how does it enable her operations and streamline her operations? And if it doesn't, then I'm going to continue to iterate before it can transition to her. And Denise, I don't know if you had anything else.
Yeah, so thanks, Mark. That's good. And thanks for the 15-part question. Appreciate it. No, actually, it was a really good question, right? So these are some of the challenges that Mark and I have spoken about, because when you look at how we would field our tactical units with those network capabilities, it was very deliberate. You had a handoff where you went through the different types of training, and you're like, okay, now you're taking O&M of it. We have to do the same thing at enterprise, right? So how do we transition capabilities that Mark's team is delivering to us and actually start really implementing at scale, right? Operationalize these capabilities. And that's a challenge that NetCom is working through, is how do we operationalize all these different capabilities that are coming online? And part of that is understanding, as we move the complexity away from the edge, and even the edge also being some of the NECs, right? As we're moving those the complexity up to what we call the global cyber center, that is in part how we operationalize, but even more so, the NECs will only have to do what only they can do. So no longer do they have to make network changes for their base post campus station. We will be able to do that from a centralized point. And Army Unified Directory Services is a prime example. When we're looking at how we're operationalizing that, the 7th SIG commander, General Eric Van de Bosch and his team, Will Martin's out there, they just provided a excellent back brief exactly of how we're going to operationalize and deliver these capabilities at scale.
And you asked a question about the application layer. The good news is it doesn't exist yet. We're working towards it today. The direction we're headed towards for this is there will be some form of software development kit that's out there, and then there's the governance process on top of that. I know I said governance and some folks wince, but there's got to be some form of governance structure on top of that. We're working through the ideas. I've floated some stuff to General Rainey about how we think that needs to be approved. But really, whether that's a soldier that writes an application, whether that's a software factory soldier that writes the application, whether it's industry that proposes one, whether it's a seated that nominates and pays for it, to get that application built and ready to go into the application layer, that's the process we think we're going to pursue. And then really there's a board of governors that sits on top of that, says, is it safe? Is it going to crash our network? Does it make sense? Put it in, and what are we pulling off? Because as we go to a more application-based model, it's going to be just like apps on your phone, where folks are going to come up with new things all the time, and we're going to pull off old stuff and put new stuff on there. That's the plan right now. Hopefully that's useful.
I would add just one more thing. And this is actually a place where we do need help from industry. You got to pressure heat us, because that pressure heating actually allows us to start really attacking our policies. If you were to hear the Army CIO, if he was standing here, he would talk about this move towards a continuous ATO. If we have the framework established and we're just building a widget on top of the framework, we don't need to do an ATO against the entire framework again. And as a part of FIX, we're actually laying down that track to move in that direction. And I think that as we move to next gen C2, you're just going to see it accelerate even more. I will say one thing. We talk a lot about the network like it's, this thing, but it's really the hardest thing about what we're doing is not getting the tech out into the field. The hardest thing that we're doing is how do we turn around and operationalize it? And culture is something that we all collectively are going to have to attack head on. Netcom and our cyber are the DODN operators for the United States Army. That is a specified task that they are now in direct support of tactical operations at all echelons. That is completely different, and we are going to be on a bit of a journey on how do we layer in the roles and responsibilities on echelon and who does what, and then what are the force structure and organizational and training things that we're going to have to work as a part of that realignment. But the days of everybody owning all their own stuff are over. It will not work in this world. We have got to make sure that we are integrated vertically completely.
I'm Todd Tibbetts with Spectrum Solutions in Huntsville, Alabama. We're working at some of your bases on operational technology. And much of the operational technology is very antiquated, the types of systems that are on the networks. And my question is, we're working with the DPWs and the energy managers and people like that in the DPWs. How is the CIO G6 involved with the DPWs on operational technology for things like the SCADA systems that are very old, the monitoring control systems, and that's where some of our enemies are on those networks, okay? So what are we doing in those areas for cybersecurity on some of those networks, and we'd like to learn more about that.
So I'll give you a brief answer, and then I'll flip it over to General McPhail and see if Mark Hitz has a question or a comment about it as well. So here's where I would tell you we're at in the OT story, right? First off, we're getting ourselves aligned for combat. So a decision was made a few years ago to place OT cybersecurity responsibilities outside the purview of the CIO and the G6. That has recently been realigned. And so we are now responsible for not only IT cybersecurity, but all cybersecurity. With that will come the alignment of the requirements, the validation of the requirements, the alignment of resources to get after it, and then smartly moving our way forward. Most importantly, though, Army Cyber has now been designated the supported command for operational technology cybersecurity. And I would submit to you FY25 is a year where we are pivoting and really starting to operationalize that, because quite frankly, we can bring a ton of operational capability to bear right now with a renewed focus on what we're doing with OT. And so that's the path that we're moving down. I think you'll see a significant move towards in 25 to start applying our current capabilities to just get the visibility that we need. And then the next hard part is what you alluded to. Some of these things have been around for a long, long, long time, and they are very antiquated, and coming up with a modernization approach for that is something we're going to have to work very closely with our G9 and AMC teammates. Denise?
Thanks, sir. No, so absolutely, we are working very closely with AMC, and as part of that, when we, General Morrison was talking about the continuous ATO, and really about operationalizing it. So as we take on this OT and this SCADA, first is really understanding what's out there, right? And so that means we've got to be able to sit down with those system owners, with our cybersecurity professionals, sit down and understand what the system is and what are those control measures we need to make sure in place to ensure the security as we go through that continuous ATO. And that's really step one, is understanding what's out there, because that's when we're going to get after the concerns you laid out with it's antiquated old technology, and is that the technology we need to continue with? Is there a bimodal solution we can put in place until we're able to modernize it? I hope that answers your question.
I would just add one thing onto it real quick. As we start censoring the network as a part of all the ongoing activities, you just described what our problem was, right? It was a DPW pushing information up approach. That's not going to get us very far, and it wasn't. But as we start censoring it, think something like Comply to Connect. We're going to learn a lot of hard lessons as we implement Comply to Connect, because a lot of the systems that you're talking about, we're going to find. And so as we get it censored, it's going to allow us to start moving it at a clip that we haven't been able to move at before.
Good afternoon. Colonel Erica Brooks, Commander, Information Systems Engineering Command. So there are multiple efforts across the Army's warfighting functions in support of continuous transformation. With the multi-layered requirements process, how are we ensuring that all of those requirements that are coming up from the warfighters meet unified network standards so that they're built in from the beginning and so they can actually work on a network that operates with zero trust principles? Thank you.
So I'll be the first one to jump on that, and I'm sure I'll get some help. First thing is that the network cross-functional team, which has now been renamed the C2 cross-functional team, is the clearinghouse for all those. So nothing touches the network. None of the requirements are coming up from anybody's other requirements documents that are going to touch the network are allowed actually to pursue through the FCC pipeline until they've come through the network cross-functional team, now the C2 CFT, as a clearinghouse, just to make sure that we understand that we're adhering to those principles. And in the future, as we build out more requirements, certainly for that application layer, I think that relationship's going to get stronger. We're going to have to actually up our game and do more of those boards and more of those panels. Something else that we're looking to do with Mr. Kitts is we've gone back through all the requirements documents from the ones that a lot of folks may be familiar with, CPI-2, which is the command post document, and realized that 52 pages with over 100 pages of annexes is probably not the right approach, and it's hyper specific. So we're working on an approach that Mr. Kitts kind of alluded to a minute ago. So we're going back through there, editing that down, getting that to a little bit more usable format so that it can keep up with the speed of change. It still gives Mr. Kitts enough of a requirement to point to without being massively prescriptive. And as all the other requirements writers are working on that same pathway. We're incorporating them as part of that team for the rewrite to make sure that they're all having that voice up front so that we're not doing this on the back end or having folks build out their own discrete data pipelines, because you've heard it from everyone up here today. That's not going to work anymore. Letting somebody write one from the bottom all the way up to the top doesn't work. So we've got to actually incorporate them from the beginning. Cool thing is everyone's excited. I think universally people recognize this. So we're getting a lot of support as we're pulling in CDIDs and other requirements writers to get us straight. So I think we're in a good place here, but we do have some work to do to clean up some of our documents.
Ladies and gentlemen, this will be the last question.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sergeant First Class Davison with the Space Command J5. Just had a question. So we're talking about working in concert. You guys are building a unified network, correct? Are we working in concert with parallel efforts with like the Air Force, the Space Force, the Marines, and Navy to be able to build a network at the department level versus just the Army level? Thank you.
Sure. I'll answer that question. I think, do you know what Project Convergence is? Yeah, so Project Convergence is one of those, AFC leads Project Convergence. It's one of those experimentation exercises that we conduct every year that brings all of the forces together, all the joint forces to include OSD that brings in all of JADC2 and everything else into the, and I'm speaking your language, I see you pointing. Yeah, so we bring all that into Echelon. I think the big takeaway from that particular event is how do we get to the best of breed for capability across all the forces as we look at the unified network. But everything that we are trying to do to unify the network is being shared across all the services today. Okay, so I think I'll just close out real quick. And so do you have anything else you need to say? Okay. I think what you heard today is, you know, when I was at the network cross-functional team, now C2 cross-functional team, there was an alignment between myself, Mr. Kitts, and the team. But what you're seeing now is a unified alignment between, the G6, the service provider. You've seen it across the C2 network cross-functional team, and now you're seeing the alignment that comes with the C3N. So there's alignment here that I think now you'll hear that messaging go forward from this day. And so we'll take all your questions in the future on what we're trying to do to unify this network. Thanks.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Next up in 10 minutes at the Warriors Corner, front door to the Army. How the California Commitment seeks to integrate total Army recruiting.
This is where you time one, so I'm all the articles, like I said, it's a lot of yes.
Yeah, I'll take this one. Just three, I got three. Okay, so take this one.
Since 2019, it's been a collective effort to rebuild a website that resonates with our audience, supports the Army's accessions mission, and adapts over time. In pursuit of a better, faster, smarter next generation of GoArmy.com, we had to optimize, advance, and evolve. Phase 1, optimize. When prospects searched for the Army online, our website wasn't a top result. It was detached and disconnected. Additionally,